Hey everyone, I'm Peter O'Neill. I work at WebRide as a DevOps consultant, and we help do digital transformations, moving legacy technologies to the cloud. So if that's something you're in need of, come find me out there. And yeah, well, hopefully this is almost as exciting as grappling. But let's start off with the two terms we're talking about, AuthN, or authentication, right? When we are identifying a person, think of this maybe like a driver's license or a passport, and AuthZ, authorization, you can think of this as the access or things that they can do, right? And so we have the coupling of these two things. If we're talking about a license, that might be coupled to car keys, right? Where these two things go nicely together, but someone can take your car keys and drive your car without having a license, right? Versus getting like a Nexus card or specific access, oops, tightly coupled. All right, and so let's do etymology, where we have authentication, we have these, and authorization coming from very old Latin words that basically just say someone needed to write this down, right? Not exactly super exciting. And so if we look at these old examples, we have something like a challenge where a knight might ride up and say, halt, who goes there, stops, they raise a banner to identify themselves. Then they request access to talk to the king, and they need to present something like a crest or a seal that gets them access, right? And so for a very long time, we've been doing this sort of very boundary kind of blocking, where you can see here walls all the way back from 3000 BC, where all the way up to like 1300. And so right now we move into more modern locks where we do things like key codes and passcards and NFC chips, right? And so now we are accelerating the rate of change as we advance our authorizations, right? And so now we move things into the digital space where we started doing things like passwords and, once again, biometrics, and then moving into PKI, where we want to have more specifics around, or more encrypted communications, right? And then now we did so well at the first level identification, we wanted to add a second layer of identification and using more tokens and OTPs, and then maybe even doing multi-factor, where we want to create, use 3 or more of these options, right? And when we're talking multi-factor, we are using 3 things: something a person knows, something a person has, and something that a person is, like a fingerprint or maybe like an eye scan or something else that uniquely identifies them, right? And so when we're talking access control, we can see like RBAC, RBAC, RBAC. There are multiple forms. Normally you're going to be talking about role-based access control, but I've also come across and used ABAC for attribute or policy-based or relationship-based access control mechanisms as well. And so when we're talking about this access, typically it's defined as coarse grain or fine grain. And so you can think of this as either grouping these into large bundles that brings rules together, or very specific attributes that you want to assign. And so not just for the granularity, but also the level that you're applying these granularities, you can do this at a wide range, such as like the network, or you can bring it down to the system, or even more specifically to like a file or a process. And so you have these two things that work together to define what can happen, right? And so typically we're here this buzzword, zero trust all the time. And so this is a scale, moving from that very like coarse grain all the way over to very fine grain stuff. And so if it was true zero trust, you'd have like that perfect fine grain on every single file. Probably doesn't happen, right? So if you're building this yourself, you're going to choose an authentication method, pick your identity provider, choose those access controls, and then start layering your authorization tools on top of it so you can write policies, and then don't forget to encrypt everything. Right, and if you're using standard authorization tools, you can see you have a great selection of authentication tools that pair very nicely with this authorization tools for your enterprise tools, right? And they don't like when you swap them and use 2 different ones. But most people like open source tools, right, where you have a little bit more options and tooling that you can use, right? So now you can actually choose how to pair these things together and choose these tools and build something that is much more specific to your use case. And so when you're using these, you have to look at what are the standard protocols today. And so we have SSO that does the trust between the identity provider and service providers, SAML, security assertion, which sends that information over to Auth 2.0, almost got there. I'm going to say one of these jokes because this is moving much faster than I thought it would. Why did the computer go on a diet? Because it needed to lose some excess weight. All right, and so just a quick recap. We have authentication, auth with an N, who are you, and authorization, auth with a Z, what you can do. All right, thank you, everybody.